My name is Scott Wilson. I'm a member of the Civic League's Executive Committee, and I also serve as the chair of the Naushop Homeowners Association, which is one of the Civic League's 25 local neighborhood associations on island. Today's annual forum is a traditional event. It furthers one of the Civic League's core missions, encouraging participation in town government. Our aim is to help Nantucket voters make informed choices when they go to the polls on May 21st. We encourage the voters to turn out, and we provide the candidates with this opportunity to address the broad audience of island voters. Today's program is available live on Zoom and is also being carried live on NCTV 8. A recording of this forum will be made available to others to view later as an on-demand YouTube video. The Nantucket Civic League is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation and is nonpartisan. We sponsor this event without favor or prejudice toward any candidate, and we invite all candidates in contested races to attend and participate. Our thanks go out to all the candidates for committing their time and energy to seeking public office, especially on such a beautiful spring day. I volunteered to act as moderator today, and I will also serve as the timekeeper in order to keep us on schedule. During this meeting, we encourage all of you watching on Zoom to submit your questions. To submit a question electronically, simply click on the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type your question in the box that pops up. It can be directed to one specific candidate, or it can be directed to all of the candidates on a specific panel. We do ask that you submit your questions as we begin each portion of our program, and I will try to remember to remind you as we start each new portion. Today, we're hearing from candidates, from the following positions: the Select Board, the Planning Board, the School Committee, the Land Bank, the Community Preservation Committee, and the Historic District Commission. For each, we will introduce the candidates and allow them each to provide a short opening statement about their qualifications and positions on issues, not to exceed 2 minutes. After that, I'll ask a few questions and then turn to your Zoom questions before giving the candidates a chance to make a final short closing statement. Our Zoom questions will be managed by my NCL colleague, Maureen Phillips. With 6 panels and 15 candidates, we will need to move quickly. One final word. The Civic League is about issues, and we do not allow participants to level accusations or attacks on the other candidates or anyone else. We kindly remind the participants to stay focused on the issues, and we ask that the audience questions also be issues focused. We thank you for your cooperation in this regard. Okay, let's get started. We'll start with the Select Board, and to begin, we'll hear from 2 of the 3 candidates who are running for the one open seat, Rick Atherton and Clifford Williams. Unfortunately, Dawn Hill-Holgate, the incumbent, couldn't be here today, but she provided a written opening statement, which I will read third. Mr. Williams, let's start with you.
You want me to start my opening statement?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the Civic League, Scott, you, and Don and Rick for being crazy enough to run. I'm not sure. I've lost track of how many times I've run. Continue to see the same issues, and that's why I run. Everybody says I just repeat myself, but unfortunately, I repeat myself because the roads still have big potholes. The landfill hasn't been resolved. You saw at town meeting, we still have an issue with the African Meeting House that hasn't been resolved. I just continue to, as a taxpayer and someone who was born here, raised here, try to participate, give my opinion, my views, and try to do what's best for the island, best for the taxpayer, and best for the future in Nantucket. And that's why I just continue to try to be involved like everybody should be and do my civic duty. And I'm, again, just trying to get on the board and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Atherton. Oops, you're on mute.
There we go. I think I got unmuted now. Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Hello to the audience. I'm the Rick in the Pick Rick signs and ads you might have seen. I'm running for the Select Board because I believe we can do better. When I stepped down from the board 7 years ago, I said I would stay actively engaged with town government as a member of the public, and I have. But today, more than ever, Nantucket faces complex challenges that demand a renewed commitment to good government. I believe my years of service on the Finance Committee and the Select Board, balanced with my more recent experience as a concerned citizen, would be helpful right now on the Select Board. I have three priorities that reflect my commitment to good government. The first is to work for a transparent and accountable town government that welcomes your involvement. Our elected officials must remember they represent Nantucket citizens. My second priority is to support a healthy island economy while preserving our historic character and fragile environment. The proposed Surfside Crossing development, the expansion of the south ramp of the airport, and the impact of corporate short-term rentals in our residential neighborhoods are just three examples of this challenge. The third priority is to keep our financial house in order, mindful of the impact of new spending on the taxpayers. Taxes for many are up 20% or more, and we have yet to feel the brunt of capital overrides already passed and not yet borrowed. These are hard choices that are coming ahead of us, and it won't be easy. Of course, the most essential aspect of good government is choice. I'm running because you deserve a choice. As your Select Board member, I will champion transparency, advocacy for citizen involvement, and work to streamline government for greater efficiency and effectiveness. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. And now I'm going to read Dawn Hill-Holgate's statement, which she provided to the Civic League. Thank you to the Civic League for making this event possible, and to all of you who took the time to be there today. I regret that I could not attend, as I am attending a family funeral off island. She then provides a quote. Sustainability is how the town of Nantucket, with a focus on historic preservation, natural resources, hazard mitigation, solid waste management, energy, public health, and education, institutionalizes practices in municipal operations that support a balance of the economic, environmental, and social health of our island, which meet the needs of current residents and visitors without compromising the ability of future generations to meet evolving needs, close quote. This statement is the opening vision of our Select Board strategic plan, which we use as a guiding lens in our decision process as the town's policymaking board. We also update the plan on a yearly basis as priorities and needs change and evolve. There is a great deal of effort put into the categories and goals contained within the strategic plan, as well as ongoing regular town business and new issues that arise regularly. This is a big job, and we are operating as a solid team with broad range of views at the present time. I would love to continue to contribute my efforts as a board member and see through many of the projects and initiatives that are underway, too numerous to detail here. However, I will say that the future of our island home and the Salt Marsh Senior Center are of great importance to me, as are improved bus service to combat traffic congestion and recreational initiatives for the health and wellness of our year-round population. I have been serving on the Nantucket Select Board representing the community since 2015, and I hope you will consider voting for me to continue this service. I have been your chair 4 out of my 9 years, including 2 years in a row, to provide continuity during the great challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. I bring to the board the perspective of a longtime islander whose father ran a local construction business while I was growing up, and my mother was a pastry chef before becoming a stay-at-home mother to 5 of us. I have a daughter in Nantucket High School and a son who is heading for college in Massachusetts next fall. My father, all my siblings and nieces and nephews are all here and ingrained in various parts of the community. I work for a local business as a real estate broker. Although I am committed to my profession, it allows me the flexibility to attend to my select board duties and meeting schedules. I understand the challenges of raising a family and working on the island, as well as balancing the integrity of our historic, fragile, and beautiful island with the needs for small businesses to survive in a seasonal tourism-based industry. I have a great deal of experience in town government at this stage, both as a former town employee in the early 2000s, 12 years of service on the HDC, prior to my now 9 years on the select board. I am committed to Nantucket and to our community now and for the future. If you give me the opportunity to serve on the select board, I promise to be fair, to use common sense, to be open, accessible, and available to listen to the community. Feel free to reach out anytime. Email me, My email is available on the town website. Lastly, remember to vote on May 21st. Your voice matters. So with that, we'll turn to questions, and the process will be I'm going to ask 3 questions, after which we'll turn to some audience questions. And Rick, you'll go first this time. What was your top priority? What would be your top priority as a member of the select board? You're muted.
I think a top priority is to make sure the select board meetings are more inclusive and welcome participation from citizens and the committees that the board has set up. I have found much of the board agendas presented by consultants through PDF presentations and no real good discussion of the issues surrounding the agenda items. I think that's important in order to get consensus to help us move forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, as I've spoken before, I'd like to get back to the fundamentals of our roads that are in terrible condition, the landfill, the island home. I was on the island home committee a few times. I'd also like to just reel in our state government. We've had this horrendous project with these windmills offshore, whether you like them or you hate them. I just don't believe they're going to help with global warming or global cooling or electricity bills. I think they're just going to make them go through the roof. I just like to make the government more accountable, whether it's here in Nantucket or whether it's the state or federal level. And just get back to the basics and try to run the town. We just need fire, police, schools, sewers. I would put all that first and make that a priority as a Board of Selectmen member. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll address the second question to you first this time, Mr. Williams. What are your thoughts on the outcome of the annual town meeting vote on the short-term rental issues, and what do you see as the next steps?
Well, it's unfortunate that we've been talking about this for 3 years and we have study committees. And I think they just need to make the proposals a lot more simplified. It seems like we make this document so complicated, their heads just spin, and once you lose people with the legal jargon and the complexity of it, they just give up and either vote no or just get so exhausted with it. We had a study committee, and again, we can't seem to simplify what it is we're going to do. And then we get to town meeting and they start editing it and people get up because they've spent a lot of time trying to read the document. And then they make the statement, now I've got to look at this and I don't understand it again. How can I, so I think we really need to simplify the whole prospect of what we want to do. And like, I guess the biggest thing is getting the commercial part of it out and still allow people to, rent their homes the way they always have, but stop these maybe BlackRock or the Blue Group, I forget what they're called, from just industrializing the short-term rental business.
Thank you. Mr. Atherton.
Yes, it's interesting. We spent, as Cliff just said, 3-4 years dealing with this problem. My sense is that the town meetings over the past 2 or 3 years have made clear that a why in the zoning to permit short-term rentals by right in all residential areas for every single lot on the island was not the way to go. And town meeting said that again this year. The next step, I think, is to make sure the select board participates more actively to make sure the issues related to Article 60, a bylaw that passed, and the implementation of the registration program are fully understood, and because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of specific questions. And my sense is the select board can be helpful in that regard. They need to have longer and fulsome discussions with participants, maybe a work group session of the select board with all the interested parties ability to have the ability to talk to one another and with the select board. If we're gonna actually have a town meeting in September, we need to make sure what we're trying to ask for is understood and consensus is built before we get to that town meeting. And I don't think that's happened up till now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Atherton, you get the next question first. And it's sort of apropos what you were just saying. Simply put, has Nantucket outgrown the annual town meeting form of government?
Well, we've had Town Government Study Committee completed its work 3 years ago. And we have Curtis's Barnes citizen article with another committee studying the same question. You know, I've long felt that one of the most important parts of town meeting are zoning issues. And I think as we go forward looking at options, we need to understand the specifics of the various elements of town meeting and how they would change either under a representational form of government or a town council form of government. And the first responsibility, I think, of the committee we've set up and the select board is to make sure those issues and concerns are fully understood. I must admit that 3 nights in a row going to 10:15 2 nights and 9 o'clock or so the third night is exhausting for everybody. And so if there are solutions that might help mitigate that, then I'm willing to discuss them. But I also want to say I'm a believer in the democracy town meeting offers. Our citizens have an ability to petition the government directly with only 50 signatures. And I think that's a tradition Nantucket needs to find a way to incorporate in any changes we make.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Unfortunately, if we get rid of town meeting, I don't think we'll have any say. And I think what you've seen, we'll get back to the windmill issue where they leased land and mobilized back in 2012 without anybody knowing this was going on. I think going forward, if you had no town meeting, you just wouldn't have any control. You wouldn't know what was going on. You'd just be doing whatever they wanted to do anytime they wanted to do it, just like the federal government. I mean, I think back when we had the room tax that we shot down year after year, and then the governor just a couple of years ago took his pen and put it into law. So that shows you how much say you have locally. You just be so disconnected from what's going on and the taxes you're going to pay going forward. Even though it's not perfect and it's frustrating, I think it's the last horizon for anybody to have any say in government. And if we take it away, we're not going to have much say at all. Thanks.
Thank you. We're now going to turn to audience questions, and I'd just like to ask the audience, please submit your questions on the chat function. You will not be able to see other people's questions, but we are seeing them, and we have a couple. And I'm going to ask Maureen to provide the first one.
Excuse me, Scott, I am not seeing, let's see. I have not seen a question except other than one for the school committee. I am
Okay.
Are you do you see questions after that one? I'm sorry that
I'm like you. I see the school committee question. Here's one. For all select board candidates after ATM 2024, what are your thoughts on an alternative town council form of government? And there's another question up above in the same vein. And that was the question, of course, I just asked. So
yeah, that's what I assumed. We do have another one. Should we go with maybe the other one that had been prepared in advance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what you want to read that one?
Yeah, okay. To the candidates, what is your opinion of the select board taking positions at odds with other town committees, such as the ZBA, the Concom, or even the Finance Committee? And let's see, we'll start with Mr. Williams on that one.
I believe that's why we have the government we have, so we can have opposing views and everybody should have an input. Obviously, I have different experiences in life, and I've built houses, I've built roads. I'm in the aviation industry, so hopefully I bring that to the Board of Selectmen. I was on the Finance Committee. I had people vote against me. I was the only one who voted at one point to move forward with the fire station for $150,000 for the air conditioning system, and I was voted down. And 6 months later, it cost us $2.5 million. So I think it's great to have opposing opinions. Hopefully you come up with a favorable one, and one that doesn't cost more money like that situation did. So like I said, I would champion the fact that we have input from different views from different people who have different experiences to keep our town running.
Mr. Atherton.
Yeah, it's clear to me that different committees can have different points of view. I think the issues that we've seen, for example, with the Conservation Commission or the ZBA when the town withdrew from the Surfside Crossing suit, can have differences. But I think the important thing the select board still has to do is make sure the proper resources are available and that it has respect for the decisions of its various committees. And we're really talking here about, I think, the regulatory committees, the HDC, the Concom, respect the decisions of the planning board, even though that's a little different situation because they're elected. But I think it's okay to have differences, but it's not okay to withdraw proper support from those committees to allow them to deal with the issues before them and come to their own conclusions.
Thank you. Just checking the,
We seem to have a quiet,
quiet group today.
maybe everyone's exhausted still from town meeting.
Okay. And we're also missing Dawn Holgate,
Yeah.
who would have helped. So that concludes, I guess, our portion with respect to the select board candidates, and we'd like to thank them very much.
But excuse me, the closing statements.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Atherton, you can go first. This is your chance for a final closing statement.
Sure, thank you. First, I would like to thank the dedicated volunteers of the Civic League for hosting Meet the Candidates once again this year. In closing, my message to Nantucket voters is very straightforward and simple. We need a government that is more open, transparent, and welcomes your involvement. We need a government that can support a healthy island economy without sacrificing our historic character and fragile environment. We need a government that is fiscally responsible and mindful of the impact that rising taxes have on our citizens. So on May 21st, I hope you vote for me, Rick Atherton, for Select Board, because we can do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. Mr. Williams, you're up.
Yes, I'd also like to echo what Rick says with the financial stability, and thank the Civic League and everybody for putting this on today. I basically just want to keep it back to the people. Let the people decide what they want, and then give them good information so they can make good decisions. I know it's the Board of Select the town meeting was attacked a little bit for, I think it shut down a $3 million study for affordable housing, and I made a point that I offered them 10 houses for $4 million, but they want to do a study for $3.5 million to see how they can get houses. So that kind of stuff I would just want to bring an end to. And I don't want to buy buildings that I believe cost $500,000 for $5 million. It's just the amount of money that's being spent. And just because I'm in the business of building houses, building roads, I'm in the aviation business. I've worked for the federal government. I just think we can do better. And Rick said, some transparency, involve people more, don't have closed door sessions. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And okay, now we segue into the candidates for the planning board. I would remind the audience, please, to start submitting your questions for these two candidates, David Iverson and Campbell Sutton. And we'll begin with their opening statements. So Mr. Iverson, you're up.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Civic League and the attendees. I'd also like to just a little disclaimer. All these opinions are mine and not any board that I sit on. My name is David Iverson. I'm currently serving as a planning board chair. I'm asking for your vote for another 5-year term. I've lived on Nantucket for 38 years and have raised 3 children here and have owned a small business for 35 years until recently when I sold it. I became involved in town politics because of Surfside Crossing. I ran on a platform of change based on citizen engagement, environmental sustainability, and fair and informed decision-making. I was naive, I was idealistic, and most importantly, I was ill-informed. I stand before you today well-informed, still idealistic, but in a more measured way. I still believe in a platform of engagement, environmental sustainability, and fair and informed decision-making. I am now more than ever in a better position to continue to move forward those ideals. I am well versed in zoning and its protections of property rights for all of us. After serving for 5 years, I have a much better understanding of our Subdivision Control Act as well as the special permit process. I have learned how to build relationships in town government and in turn leveraging them to accomplish goals. We often hear people get labeled as pro-development, anti-development. I have come to understand it is far more nuanced than that. Every application that comes before us has its own merits and challenges, and we have an extremely specific group of bylaws to apply to them. Every piece of property comes with a certain set of allowable rights for development. These cannot be ignored. We must apply these laws in a manner that is consistent with property rights. What I offer you as a candidate is a knowledge of the process and an ability to use the process in a direction which best serves the community. I will continue to listen to concerned neighbors and citizens while working to balance them with the applicant's wants. Sweeping change is not possible with the structure of property rights as they exist now, but what is possible is to continue to bend the arc of development when possible in a way that best serves our community, one application at a time. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's time for Campbell Sutton.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, super. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity today. I have not ever done anything like this, so probably not going to be as smooth as everybody else. But my name's Campbell Sutton. I've been living on Nantucket for 24 years, though my family has been here since 1986. I am also a small business owner. I work in the building trades. Previously, I was a school teacher. I started attending planning board meetings in 2017, helping some friends of mine that were having some issues with rezoning in their neighborhood. Once that was resolved, I continued to attend meetings and applied to and subsequently was appointed to be an alternate until the spring of 2022. While I was on the board, I advocated for bike racks at both businesses and multi-unit housing developments, single curb cuts for property access, especially when sidewalks and bike paths were involved, and tried to reduce the number of stacked parking. I know that sounds complicated, but it's where you, for 4 parking spaces, you allow 4 cars to park one behind each other, just for the psychological negative effect built in due to that. I have worked on a number of boards in the town. In the 1980s, I was on the recycling and solid waste committees. In the 19 or 20 teens. I have been on the Agricultural Commission for 9 years. I was also on a town government study committee that closed 3 years ago. And pre-COVID was on the BPAC Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and on the Park and Rec Committee. I think on all the committees that I've been on, I come prepared. I do the research and the work to ensure that the best outcomes can be had and that people understand what is going on and why. So trying to get decisions into common language that people use and not in so much legalese that is often what is presented to people and confuses them. On the board, I think I really want to advocate for more community participation. I think that there's a lot of division that occurs due to a perception that people aren't allowed to or permitted to speak their minds on certain issues, or that they just don't know that issues are going on. I know at town meeting, they always say, well, come to the meetings. Well, we have a lot of committees with a lot of meetings, many of which are held during working hours for people. And
Your time's about up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll turn to questions, and the first question will go to Campbell Sutton. What will you do to prioritize the area plan process so that Nantucketers will see some progress towards completion?
I think what's really important there is to include more people in the area plan. So often these things are, you think you're discussing them in a wider group because of the people that are there, but so often what's important is to reach the people that aren't there, because those are the ones that are going to create the greatest resistance to your efforts. And they also need to understand more specifically how these plans are going to affect them directly. So that's.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson?
Thank you. We're talking about the small area plans, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So the small area plans are, again, a piece of the puzzle. I think that people don't understand that these areas are very well-defined areas. And when we develop this area plan, it is just about that area and not about anything outside of that area. So I think we've had some bumpy rides putting together the small area plans. It's been difficult for some of these groups to operate under the open meeting law, and that's been a struggle. But we're really actually coming down the home stretch here on the small area plans and the master plan as a whole. So more work is involved. I don't think we're off the rails. We just need to complete the process. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question is, given that all 5 members of the planning board are also members of the NP and EDC, do you have concerns about the interlocking nature of the membership of those two organizations? Does the relationship between the planning board and the NP and EDC need to be reevaluated? And Dave, we'll start with you.
It does. I think it needs to be updated. We are in that process now. And what we're looking to do is to reduce the amount of planning board members that sit on there and to bring in more stakeholders in the community to have seats.
Thank you. Good. Campbell Sutton?
I would agree, though. I think, again, it's, on the NP and EDC, they do a lot of talking within their own group. And I feel like a lot gets excluded. So they're going to make the decisions about how the new setup goes. And they don't really need approval for it. I really believe that there should be fewer planning board members. I think there should be more more people involved, depending on, and I say people involved, and we all know it's difficult to get people involved, but I think if places felt like community members could make a difference, they'd be more willing to participate. And as the planning board currently sits on the NP and EDC, I think it's just a very closed situation without enough new energy and new ideas coming to the fore. It's sort of like talking to the choir in there, and obviously they need more responsible participation. I think there's a problem with the state governance, like it's a state group formation, and yet the director of the Plus works for the NP and EDC, but oversees town employees. I think there's a problem with that. I don't know all the ins and outs of how that goes, but that executive session that led to having, being found to be out of compliance with open meeting laws is a problem. And I think when you're in a group, confined little group, you can come up to think there are things that are correct that aren't. And so if you get more diversity in there, then I think you have a greater opportunity for mistakes like that not to happen.
Thank you. The next question. Do you feel that sufficient progress is being made for the implementation of changes to the NP and EDC that were approved at last year's ATM? And Campbell, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay, super. The changes, was it at last year's ATM that those changes? The one that is at the Attorney General's office now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Personally, I don't think so. I think it's one thing to talk about making changes, and it's another to do them. And I just don't see any activity around the doing. And Dave was talking about the, small area plans and the master plan. And, the community is not involved in these things. And we can't afford to wait. We're losing our community. People are not trusting the government or these committees and boards. That's really unfortunate. And I don't think we can afford to wait to implement good, sensible adjustments and change for the community. This isn't just, the board. The board should be thinking about our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson.
Can you repeat the question? I think we got off the mark for a bit.
Do you feel that sufficient progress is being made to implement the changes in the NP and EDC that were approved at last year's ATM?
So what was approved at last year's ATM was a home rule petition, and that has not gone through the full process at the State House yet. So there's not really mandated changes to be made. With that said, and I said it in my earlier answer, is that we have been looking carefully at this, and the NP and EDC is invested in lessening the participation of the planning board and to broadening the membership by stakeholders in the community. So I think the work we've done, it's not finished. It could happen faster, I'll agree, but it's a difficult discussion. Remember, the planning board's 5 members of a 11-member board, I think. So, we don't necessarily rule the day. We all have differing opinions, but it is in process. We've had public meetings in it. As with the master plan, we have public outreach and public sessions in it. And if we have failed to reach everyone, then we need to work harder. But to say that we're doing it in private just is disingenuous. Thank you.
Thank you. And this next question will be for you first, Dave.
Yep.
Given the last second changes this week to the planning board's recommendation, as well as the last minute drafting changes to the STR zoning warrant, what changes can be made to the ATM process from the planning board's perspective?
So I think that a couple of things. Changes on the floor of town meeting are not good. We've seen it. I don't think it's a great look, and I don't think it helps the article in the long run. I think that this was a kind of a particular situation, unfortunately, and I have gone through the timeline a couple times on it, and I'm willing to go through it again. But basically, we heard the Article 59 the first time. I think it was on February 8th, and the board voted then. One board member recused, so there was a 4-member board, and the vote was 3-1 to give it a positive recommendation for town meeting. And then came the few other warrant articles that dealt with the short-term rental work group, and the select board tried to find a consensus there and put those warrant article authors together. And we agreed at that time that we would change our motion to take no action to let that process happen. And hopefully see another article that we would make a recommendation on. Well, between that time and town meeting, the ward decision came down, which I think kind of scrambled what the select board was trying to do. And then we were asked to return to our old recommendation. And unfortunately, we planned on having that meeting a week before town meeting, and through some technical errors, we were unable to do that. And so it had to be, unfortunately, the day before. And I don't think it's a good look. I'm not proud of that, but it's where the cards fell. Does that answer the question? I think I've lost track of what the original question was, to be honest.
Your answer went right to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen, do you have a question from the audience?
Yes, I do. This one is for Dave Iverson, and goes to the small area plan work groups again. The NPEDC demanded that the area plan work groups operate within the open meeting law, despite the fact that these are made up completely of volunteers from each of the areas. There has been no training or other information presented to the work groups other than a poorly presented draft guideline, which has not been implemented. Why haven't the area plan work groups received training in open meeting law other than being told to do it on their own?
All very good questions. I know who has been working with Mr. Mandel in the small area plan in Nantucket, and I know that it has been an issue. I think that the issue is a lot of members in these small meeting groups don't necessarily want to abide by the open meeting law, and it's not really an option. As far as training goes, correct. I mean, this is the NP and EDC. I'm not the chair of the NP and EDC. But I think that open meeting law, I did it recently, is available, and just by reaching out to the town, you can get the times and dates to do those. It's done through Zoom. It's very easy. You sign up, you show up at the appointed time, and you have a very good training. So I think that if the small area plan members are having a difficult time finding that training, then that's our fault, and we need to make sure that's provided to them.
Okay.
Sorry, Campbell Sutton, I realize I didn't give you a chance to respond to the last question that I asked, and if you have anything you'd like to say, please do. It was the question about
Yes, I was wondering if you could, I thought I got off the hook there. I was like, oh, okay, fine.
I'm sorry.
If you could reread it, I believe it had something to do about Article 60 and Article 59
It did.
or
It was,
something.
given the last second changes this week to the planning board's recommendation, as well as the last minute drafting changes to the STR zoning warrant, what changes can be made to the ATM process from the planning board's perspective?
Well, I think the town meeting process is fine. I think, as Dave said, and as Cliff said earlier, you know, the idea that you can put an extensive change or amendment into an article on the floor after people I know for myself, I mean, I have been going through the warrant since February trying to understand each of the things. And then suddenly you think you've got a clue and you think you know how you'd vote on it and you want to hear discussion. And then discussion turns to an amendment nobody knew about. They don't understand. So obviously that's a flawed approach by the groups and committees concerned with bringing that forward. That would be the FinCom and Planning Board, and to a degree, the Select Board. I know I kept track of the Select Board, and I kept thinking that we were going to get something different, and then we didn't. But I do think that one of the problems with Article 60, as I had brought up after it, something similar had failed, is that the pieces need to be pulled out, and so that you're not having this one huge document, something where things are bite-sized. So maybe you put Article 60 into a couple of different articles, or have something right beside it that has it in English, plain English, versus in the legalese. Because I know I helped a lot of people understand Article 60, and I felt terrible when it came up on the floor as something completely different. As far as Article 59 goes, I think the town voters have been saying for 3 years that they're not looking for short-term rentals across the board. Nobody wants that. I think our zoning use chart is a perfect mechanism through which you can create nuance for short-term rentals. You have your commercial neighborhoods, it might be more appropriate. But then again, you also have the thing of maybe there are homeowners associations that want to have short-term rentals in there, you know, as part of their options, but not as something that you have to short-term rent or you can't be a member of the association or buy or anything like that. But so I think there's a lot of nuance that needs to go on. And I just don't see, in the years this has been going on and with the consultants we hired, I have not seen any movement towards nuance. It's all or nothing, and it's gotten us nowhere. So I really, again, would prefer to have a public forum, not get consultants, but get a public forum going. And same for those area plans where you could have a public forum where people can speak and knowledgeable people can run the meeting, versus sort of throwing it out there. And to that point, sorry to carry on, but to that point, I think my background in education is very helpful in creating curriculum or helping people understand things, because I've done it for 20 years, not specifically in this, but whether it was, you know, molecular biology or physics or economics or math, for that matter, I really am able to help people understand. And I think with those area plans, you need people to help get them to where they want to go so that the end product is what they're looking for, not what the planning board is looking for. And I think by not giving tools, you know, and helpfulness, you're setting up a situation in which you don't make much progress over time, and the end result isn't what the people were looking for. And we need to create more positive energy, because I know the island has a lot of wonderful people on it, that want the best for everybody. And I think that should be a good focus for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maureen, I see a couple more questions. Is that right?
Yeah, there's one it's a kind of a detailed point about Article 59, and it's about what happened at annual town meeting. So I guess this would go to Mr. Iverson. When giving a positive recommendation on Article 59, was the planning board then aware of Mr. Cohen's technical changes, which were, like, as an aside, those were the ones that came up on the board at the ATM, or was at the ATM the first you were aware of these changes, as were ATM attendees?
We were, he showed us the changes in the meeting. At that point, unfortunately, like I said before, that was the day before the meeting. And so we didn't really have an opportunity to disseminate that. There was 78 people there, so we weren't the only ones that saw him, to be honest. And as was said at town meeting, I didn't vote for a positive recommendation for 59. But as a side, I just want to make it clear that I have this opportunity to do so, is that 59 doesn't represent a yes for anyone that wants to have a short-term rental on this island. What 59 represents is part of a package of regulations. And it's just one piece that, in my opinion, needs to exist, because you're still not allowed to have a short-term rental unless you comply with the general bylaw portion. So the representation that change in the use chart represents island-wide short-term rentals is completely inaccurate. I think that we've seen that it goes down every year. But there's a reason that it keeps coming back, because it's part of the package, and it takes the ambiguity out of our zoning bylaw. And on the other side, we create a large amount of regulations in a general bylaw. So you can't just have a short-term rental anywhere unless you comply with the general bylaws. And so I don't know, in the future, maybe we need to craft all these general bylaws and have them pass. And then maybe people will be more comfortable with the zoning change. But it is a package that needs to happen at a similar time. Thank you.
Ms. Sutton, I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
So I believe that when I was watching the select board meeting and Mr. Cohen had wanted to present his amendments to Article 59, if I recall correctly, the select board had said not to do it at that meeting, which was the last meeting they were going to have, which I think was, it was a couple of weeks before the town meeting. And they said not to do it, but to do it like on the floor of town meeting, which probably in retrospect wasn't the best way to go about that. So just that it wasn't, the planning board's fault that things landed like that. And I think Dave has a point in the regulations. One, people need to understand what the regulations are. They need to know, how does that affect me, right? That's the big question that people want to know in 60 and 59 is, what does that mean to me, to my neighborhood? And so I think if one were providing examples, I think there's a lot of, obviously, I think there's a lot of different ways you could go about this and engage positively with the community. Short-term rentals is a hot issue, but I really think nobody's going to get their way fully. But I do believe that we need discussion, we need to compromise, but we need to understand what the results of these regulations are. I think they had something in there on doing more study in Article 60. And I don't see a point in more study on whether short-term rentals affect long-term or, housing, because throughout the country, throughout the continent and the world, practically, they are having an impact, and everyone's recognizing that impact. For instance, as my example, if I could rent a room in my house, say I did it and it was $125 a week, right? So maybe I was making whatever, $500 a month or thereabouts. And then I realized if I short-term rent that same space, I could make $500 in a weekend. Well, I mean, you don't need to study the economics of that. And I think that's what a lot of people have done. And that's why think we see so many of the short-term rentals in homes that used to offer rentals to summer employees and the like. But I'm straying. I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you. Maureen.
Yeah, so we have a response from Bruce Mandel to Dave Iverson. Bruce says, thanks for your response to the question about the open meeting law. We are complying, and he's in the Nantucket group, but it has taken dozens of personal hours for our volunteers to get to a workable understanding. And he cites Joe Topham has been very helpful for us in this regard.
Okay, there's another question up higher. Do you want to?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes. We have a question about limiting building permits. This is for both candidates. What are your thoughts about limiting building permits to slow down the growth and fully understand how to proceed with positive and sustainable growth? So
Thank you. We'll go to Campbell Sutton first on that one.
Okay, so being in the building trades, I am fully aware of the intensity with which development has been happening. I know also that there's reluctance to put a number on the number of permits. Like, let's say you allow 100 permits or 50 permits, and people get quite, the town makes a lot of money off all this development. So it's hard to get people that are looking at a fiscal picture to really comprehend what it's doing to the community. For instance, like May is a terrible time for town meeting in my world, because houses are due, construction is due, Daffodil Weekend, Memorial Weekend, 4th of July, August 1st, and it's intense. Plumbers, electricians, builders, carpenters, painters, out straight. So do they have time in this high intensity workspace to then include town meeting? I personally don't think so. I think it leads to personally, I think it leads to the reason we need places like A Safe Place and Fair Winds is because of the stress mental stress so many people are under to make things happen in time. So personally, I fully support sustainability in our economy. I sort of feel like we're in the oil sands of North Dakota at this point, with just the intensity of build out that we don't know is going to last. And sustainability, I believe if that had been a better approach, a more open approach that the town had gone with, would have resulted in the ability to create more housing in concert with more building. Each of these new mega places or new short-term rentals all require new people to work, because all your house cleaners have jobs, all your painters have jobs. So when you create a situation in which the demand outstrips the working people that you have on island, it requires a bunch of people to come. And then that bunch of people all need places to live. And because of the rate at which we built out, the housing issue just went by the wayside. And I would have preferred to see something that was in step with each other so that we could have had a more positive end result and a longer lasting economy for us. Does that,
Thank you. Thank you.
did
Yes,
that get there?
Yep. Mr. Iverson?
Yep, thank you. So I 100% would support the concept. I think that there's so many pitfalls along the way. We had a building cap at one point. I think we got 5 years worth of permits before the cap was enacted. So we will have a rush to permit. And then when we have a cap, who does it hurt? I mean, if we have a local family trying to build a house for themselves, will they get capped out? And then what does that do to a community member? What permits do we cap to make it more sustainable? I think the dream of the end is a more sustainable building business that lives with island builders and that lasts longer and it slows down the intensity. And I think all of those things are things that people support, and even I support at some level. It's just, how do we get there? You know, we can't have different rules for whether you get a permit if you live here or you don't. It's not legal. We have the run up to the cap that will see hundreds of building permits. It's a very complex, difficult question with a lot of consequences, both good and bad. So I think that if that's what the community wants, I think that it's something that we should have people look at. And I know everyone's against all these work groups and everything else, but I think just to say we should have a cap and it'll work this way is a naive viewpoint, if that makes sense. Again, I support the idea. I'm just not sure how we get there.
Got it. Anything else, Maureen? Are we all set?
No, I think that's all the questions that I can see here.
Okay, we'll go to closing statements, and let's see. I think Dave went first with the opening statement, so we'll start with Campbell this time. Campbell Sutton.
Well, I appreciate everybody participating and listening to my responses. And I don't know what to tell you. I guess the one thing I think it would be great if people knew is that I come prepared to meetings, I ask questions, and I advocate for a livable community and a positive community. So I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson.
Yeah, I don't have much of a closing statement. I urge I again thank the Civic League. I thank the attendees. I thank the people that put in the questions. I urge everyone to vote on the 21st, and I can promise you that I will continue to give this job, if I'm lucky enough to get reelected, the best possible effort and thoughtfulness as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to turn to the school committee next. There are 3 candidates for the 2 seats, but there are only 2 people here today. Esmeralda Martinez couldn't be with us today, unfortunately. But we do have Laura Gallagher Byrne as the incumbent, and Diane Flaherty. And it is a contest of 3 candidates for 2 seats, as I understand it. And so let's see, Laura Byrne, if you're ready with your opening statement, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Laura Gallagher Byrne, and I would like to thank the Civic League for this opportunity to answer questions from the community. I have been a year-round Nantucketer for 26 years, and I have spent the past 25 years of my professional life in theater and education, 12 of them with Nantucket Public Schools teaching chorus and theater at Cyrus Pierce Middle School. I'm currently the Director of Theater and Education with the Nantucket Dreamland, and I am seeking a second term with the Nantucket School Committee. I learned a great deal in my 3 years as a member of the school board and have maintained a deep commitment to serve as an active and participatory member. This includes serving on the negotiation team for the teacher contract, the IT department, the policy committee, the school lunch program initiative, and serving as a board member with Cape Cod Collaborative, Nantucket Education Trust, and as our school state representative. During my first term, I watched my son and his peers attempt to navigate the aftermath of COVID. And seeing the devastating effects of school closures and online classes years ago, when I first stepped into this position, I believed our first priority must be the mental health and wellness of our students and staff. And through that lens, I viewed the decisions we made. The health and stability of our community continues to be at the center of my philosophy, and I believe our schools need to be rigorous in instruction, aspirational in achievement, and inspirational in identifying and setting goals in order to prepare our students for lives of meaning, integrity, and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Flaherty.
Hi, welcome and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the Civic League for inviting me to be part of this forum. My name is Diane Reese Flaherty, and I am a lifelong resident of Nantucket with deep roots in this community, excuse me. My siblings, daughters, grandchildren, and myself graduated from Nantucket High School, so I have personal experience with our schools. Presently, my husband, Walter, and myself have 6 children in the in the district. However, I'm not running for personal reasons, but rather to represent the entire school population and community. I spent 10 years as a parent representative on the Nantucket High School Council and 2 years as a parent representative and 2 years on the CPS school council as a community representative. And by the way, those councils came from the 1983 Reform Act, and the school councils were a little bit more involved than they are now. We were part of the budget creations. We were part of the hiring of teachers, principals, and the superintendent. I believe now we are just advisory boards. Anyhow, that's where we got the MCASs. I spent 10 years as a parent, and I also spent numerous hours as a parent and grandparent volunteering in our classrooms as a parent and as a grandparent. I spent a lot of hours volunteering in the classroom, and I lost what I was talking about. As a volunteer, and I've chaperoned many class trips off and on island. These are some of my interactions to our school that I've participated in. Although I am not a single interest candidate, my biggest concern is the safety and security of our school building, classrooms, faculty, and students. And also that includes the drop-offs of our students daily. I also would like to ensure that we attract, hire, and retain qualified teachers. I would like to know that our teachers are fully supported by the administration and staff to successfully teach our vastly growing and diverse student population. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to moderator questions now, but I want to remind the audience again, this is your time to type in your questions for the candidates. And the first question is, what student services will you prioritize for development, attention, and fundraising? And we will start with Diane Flaherty. Oops, now you're on mute. There you go.
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
Sure. What student services will you prioritize for development, attention, and funding?
Student services,
Student
I
service.
would, the curriculum. I think we need to work on the curriculum. Certainly our test scores have been very low. I'm really not understanding your question. I apologize.
Okay.
The-
What student services do you think are deficient at the moment?
I believe it's the curriculum. I believe it's the classroom, the teaching, the behavior of the school students has been a problem. And I think I would like to get rid of the Chromebooks so that there's more interaction between the teachers and the students. Some way of getting our grades, our numbers back up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Byrne, same question.
Yes, so there are a number of disciplinary plans that are in place currently at the school, and they include the responsive classroom at the going all the way up to CPS, and then a restorative justice program that is the sort of methodology at the high school. I think both of these programs have shown a great deal of initiative from teachers and staff. And I think it's an important place for our students to feel seen and heard. So I think that that's an initiative that I continue to support, and particularly responsive classroom had initially only gone up to NIS, and then they introduced it at CPS, and it's been incredibly successful. They have noticed a dramatic decline in vandalism, and the social and emotional health of our students has improved. And this is, there's research to support this. Also, I think that there's a wellness program that's underway, and I think this is really important for our students. Next year, we're introducing meditation and contemplative practices. And I am seeing that our students are very interested in these. And I'm excited to see that there is this introspection that's being introduced, because I think, we are seeing the effects of COVID. I mean, I think that that is part of what we're seeing now on college campuses, so that more that we can introduce these disciplinary measures that are restorative. And again, these meditative practices, I think the better all of us will be, particularly our students.
Thank you. The next question is, what do you view as the school system's greatest current technological need? And we'll start with you, Ms. Byrne.
Well, we are hoping to replace the head of our technology team. So that is the biggest initiative right now. I do think we're very close. Technology is so challenging because it changes every single day. And as soon as you think that you have a grasp on it, there's something new that's introduced. It was a sad day when we saw Jennifer Erickson retire, and obviously she needed to do that for her own health and well-being. But replacing her and having someone that's with her knowledge base, that is the biggest critical need we have right now. But I'm very optimistic because we are in conversations with candidates, and I feel certain that we will be able to find that person. Also, the internet, and there are times when we lose connection, and that has been challenging, and that is something that we are also focused and working on as well.
Thank you. Diane Flaherty?
Yes, that's one of my biggest concerns, is the internet constantly going out at the school. I hear it a lot with my grandchildren, that they're, which was what I was getting to with the Chromebooks, that they don't have the internet, and their classes are interrupted, and it's hard to get back into the classrooms. And it was part of the security that I talked about in my opening statement. I don't know a lot about technology. I've learned a lot actually going to school committee. And I was very sorry when that lady, whose name escapes me, retired. something has to be done with internet. We had a problem last year with our security being hacked. And I learned a lot about that. And it is one of my biggest concerns is more than I guess that's part of the technology, but that, the internet doesn't work, and it doesn't work in classrooms and et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll start with you, Ms. Flaherty. You mentioned the curriculum earlier. What deficiencies do you think exist in the current curriculum?
Well, I've always advocated for reading and writing throughout the districts, and I don't see that happening. That's always concerned me. The curriculum, we have had wonderful math teachers, and yet our numbers remain low, and I don't understand it. I personally have said it, that I think it goes back to, can you read the problems? I don't understand why the numbers are so low. Like I said, we've had great math teachers try different ways of teaching the math. I'm one for a mold school. I don't think we do enough geography. I know we don't do enough geography. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Ms. Byrne, over to you.
Yes, I hear what you're saying about math scores, Diane. That's always a challenge. And I'm pleased to say that there has been a math interventionist that has has worked with our staff this year. And for the first time, we're seeing those math scores climb. So that is a very exciting thing. And I feel that, curriculum, and has everything to do with what that textbook is. And I think there is a deep dive that's taking place now as we're really looking through. And again, that is driven more by the administration and the teachers. So as a school committee, we are, we're privy to what is being selected, but it's gratifying to know that the math is being addressed, and there is ongoing work in the classroom by an interventionist who is working with the teachers. There's been a lot of really great response. And this is just in terms of deficits, this is completely subjective. But when I was first a TA, actually, with CPS, I was in sixth grade classroom, and they spent the entire year on Nantucket history, which I thought was fantastic. And that is something that I would love to see reintroduced in some way. Maybe it is not the entire sixth grade year spent on that, but I think our Nantucket history is so rich. We have such a community that can contribute to that I would love to see more community involvement around our Nantucket history. But that is a completely subjective response.
Thank you. I'd like to turn it over now to Maureen to see if there are any audience questions. You may be on mute, Maureen.
Yes, sorry. So there is a question. Now I just have to get back to the chat. Hang on. Well, I know what the question said. There was a question that wanted to be directed to the incumbents only, and we just have Ms. Byrne for that, which is, which of the responsibilities that you have as a school committee member are you the most proud of?
Oh, that's a lovely question. Well, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I have been very involved in a number of committees, and I did that intentionally because I thought, this is my first term. I want to have a great understanding. There are two things that I would say that I feel were very much of a success for me. I am on the policy committee, as I mentioned, and there was a parent group that came to us that were very adamant about addressing the vaping, which it was a crisis. And so I called a workshop meeting in which parents and administrators and teachers would be able to have an open dialogue. And we all came away with, there has to be a solution, and we're not quite sure what it is. So we all sort of thought about some things and then came back. And for me, I wanted it to not be a one and done. You bring in a speaker and then that person is gone. And so we were all committed to having an initiative in which we would bring in various speakers and really address at the core level. I mean, because it's not just about vaping, there's so much more that's happening, as well as the vandalism and all of that. So with my other hat on as an employee of the Dreamland, we created an initiative in which we were able to bring speakers into the schools. I'm very proud of that. I think if I had a different career path, maybe it would not have been such an easy exchange. But we received feedback from administrators and teachers that it was very powerful programming. The other thing that I am very proud of, and this is a little bit more of a new position for me, is that I am on the board as a school board member, but I sit now on the board of Nantucket Education Trust. They are very, very committed to teacher housing. And what I love is that I come away from every meeting feeling that we are making great strides in being able to secure housing for our teachers. And that is, as we all know, one of the huge stumbling blocks that we have in bringing in high quality educators. So I would say it's twofold. And, there are many things that I feel honored to serve on, and those are just two that are top of mind when I hear that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the second question is for both candidates, asking which of the responsibilities that you have that you think is the most urgent priority and why. Maybe we should go first to Diane, to Ms. Claire.
Responsibility, my biggest thing is the safety and security of the schools. I'm concerned with it. I'm concerned with whether the phones all work in the rooms, if the doors are locked and are all locked in each room, if the phones work, if the internet works. There's rooms, especially LGI, that there's no internet. I noticed that there are doors that are open that students go in the morning, and that's my biggest priority. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Byrne, the same question?
So I feel, again, after COVID, I think there was a sense of hopelessness, a sense of what's next. Is there a future for me? So I feel it's urgent that we address the social and emotional health of our students and staff. And in particular, for our students to know that there's not just one career path. And I love that there is more and more vocational training in our schools. We have our nursing program, we have our wood shop, we have our automotive. All of this is showing our students that, yes, college is not the only path forward. So I think instilling that sense of goal and purpose in our students is what is going to ignite that sense of hope in them. And I think that is a priority. I think it's going to continue to be a priority. I think we are just beginning to see sort of what the effects of COVID are upon our students. And I think that is a crucial component that we need to instill in our young people.
Thanks.
Thank you. We've got another one from excuse me, from the chat. This is from Gail Walker, who is the founder of Nantucket Lights, the Dark Skies Initiative. She notes that last year, the new outdoor lighting bylaw was passed at annual town meeting. And she also notes that the Nantucket Public Schools superintendent wanted to exempt Nantucket Public Schools from the new dark sky requirement. And she states that Nantucket Public Schools have not complied with some of the requirements of the previous outdoor lighting bylaw that was adopted in 2005, despite many complaints. If you are elected, would you support taking action to ensure that Nantucket Public Schools comply with the new requirements for outdoor lighting to make its outdoor lighting dark sky and neighbor friendly? And if not, why not? And I guess
We'll start with Laura Byrne. Yeah.
Laura.
So thank you for this question. I am familiar with the most recent dialogue around this. I'm not as familiar with the 2005 dialogue. I will say that the priority is the safety and security of our students on that campus. And I would support the school in terms of determining what that represents in terms of lighting, because while I think it is important, of course, that we want to maintain the sense of darkness on the island at the appropriate times in terms of not disturbing neighbors. But at the same time, our schools are, the way that they are constructed, if they are not properly lit, it is a safety issue and a significant one. So I would say that above all, I prioritize the safety of our students and staff, but I would certainly be open to hearing about what the parameters are around the dark skies. But again, in terms of as a school board member, my priority are the students and staff.
Thank you. Diane Flaherty?
Okay, I don't know enough about the effects of the bylaw to answer this. However, I have been on meetings or attended meetings that was talking about the lights and the lights at the intermediate school. I think they're bright, but the talk has always been that it is the safety, and I agree with Laura about that. I will say that I don't think there's enough lighting at the high school. And that certainly was demonstrated the last 3 nights at the town meeting when you're walking out in the back or in the front, that needs a little more lighting. So that may go against lights in the sky, but I do think the intermediate school is pretty bright. I live in that area. But of course it is about safety. And that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's all from the audience, Scott, that I can find.
Okay, thanks. So we'll turn then to closing statements. Laura, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you. So over the past 3 years, I have witnessed the commitment of our administration and staff in addressing the critical issues facing our schools, including vandalism, social and emotional issues, and threats to the safety and stability of our students and staff. Nantucket Public Schools is the lifeblood of our community, the future and hope of our island. It's been an honor to watch the strides already being made, and I look forward to serving and supporting our district for another 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Flaherty.
Hi, thank you. Okay, welcome everyone again. My decision to run is in no way meant to distract from the job the opponents have done. Rather, I want to use my experience to bring a new perspective, along with new solutions to issues that have gone unresolved up to this point. I thank you for your vote and support, so that I may support you and our entire school and community. Go Whalers.
Thank you very much. Great panel. Next up is the Land Bank. We have 3 candidates for 1 seat. The candidates are John Bartlett, John Stackpole, the incumbent, and Kelly Steffen, and we're glad that they're all here with us today. And so we'll begin with opening statements, and we'll take them in that order, starting with Mr. Bartlett.
Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you to the Civic League for allowing this forum to happen. Just a little bit about myself.
Excuse me, your camera's off. Do you want it off?
Uh, there we go.
There, thank you.
Okay, now we're in person too. So a little bit about myself. I've worked at Bartlett Farm my whole life. I am a Nantucket grad. I went off to college and studied plant sciences, and came back and have worked with my family on the farm ever since. As you know, part of my duties, I do work with budgets. I am familiar with making tough decisions, and have also served on a couple of local boards. The Boys and Girls Club, I'm a past president, and I also served on the Nantucket Bank Board of Directors. So definitely familiar with budgets and budgeting, and how to allocate funds for different projects. I hope that I will gather your support, and you'll vote for me on May 21st. Thank you.
Thank you. John Stackpole.
Good afternoon. I'm John Stackpole, native Nantucketer, worked and lived on Nantucket all my life. I'm running once again for the land bank, hoping to stay on here. Are you hearing me? Hello?
I am hearing you, yes.
Okay. You got my picture up there?
It's acting funny. It says you're we don't have your picture.
Hmm.
Why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay. I've been on the land bank for close to 20 years, or shortly more than 20 years. I enjoy it very much. I think it's important to Nantucket for what we're doing. We have 15 or 20 projects we're partly funded, and we're going on with them. I'd like to see us continue those. I'd like to see them continue on, and I'd like to be there for the fruition of those projects. And it's very important to me to see them through. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Kelly Steffen.
Hey everybody, thank you again Civic League for hosting this, and thank you everyone else for attending. I'm gonna try to keep this under 2 minutes. Growing up in Vermont, the value and importance of land conservation, agriculture, and recreation were ingrained in my childhood. These same values are explicit in the Land Bank's charter. I grew up coming to the Cape, and in 2001, relatives of mine purchased a home on the island, leading to many youthful summers here. In 2014, I graduated from the University of Vermont with a community and international development major. This is the study of community health using traditional economic measures in addition to public health and environmental factors. Additionally, I completed a semester intensive where I studied wildlife conservation and political ecology, which is the study of how conservation efforts affect local community dynamics. Lastly, I'm over halfway through a master's in architecture. I hope there is an obvious theme here, a focus on community and the factors that make it healthy, vibrant, and successful. In 2016, I made Nantucket my year-round home. In 2018, I started working at the Nantucket Food Pantry. This time, which included COVID, underscored the criticality of improving our local food security network and food system. To do this, I left the pantry and started working for a consulting firm focused on improving food systems, healthcare, and the environment. One example of our work is a collaboration with the Nantucket Resource Partnership, NRP, and Pippin Anchor. From this relationship, we built Nourishing Nantucket, now one of Nantucket's largest food security programs that feeds over 300 people a week. This program also ensures a strong local economy by purchasing all its food from local producers. Additionally, with NRP, we have worked to build a collaboration and communication between our island food security programs to identify sector-wide themes and create common goals for increased fundraising efforts. Almost done. My dedication to public service aligns with my desire to enhance the land bank's role in our community. Since my run for the land bank last year, I've garnered public sector experience with appointments to the land bank's community garden work group, the Agricultural Commission, the Council for Human Services, and the Town Council Study Committee, which is topical right now. If elected to the land bank, I'll prioritize conservation and coastal resiliency efforts, foster healthy dialogue on housing, create demand channels for local agriculture, support island farmers, and expand recreational opportunities on land bank land. Recognizing the land bank's pivotal role in our community's past and future, I'm committed to shaping it to meet the evolving needs of our islanders, ensuring its continued significance as a cornerstone of our community.
Thank you. And as usual, this is the time for the audience members to submit any questions they might have for the land bank candidates. And I'll turn now to my questions. And the first one, we'll start with Kelly. Of the land bank's 3 focused areas of open space preservation, recreation, and support for local farms, which of these would you focus on improving the most?
Maybe a bit ambitious or naive of me, but probably all 3. Or I would love to invest time in all 3. I think kind of talking about my previous work in ag, like I know the island food security and food system pretty well. I actually just completed a project at work where I spent over 20 hours interviewing farmers. This included with John Bartlett. Thank you for your time again, John. At housing, I think housing is obviously very topical and critical right now. And I kind of, between my social service experience, I've had a lot of touch points with people who are in the housing security world. But at the same time, I've continued to build up my relationship with land bank staff and commissioners. So I think I'd be a great person to kind of bridge or just foster that conversation and kind of have it move in a strong direction. And then recreation, I think, continue to support its recreational efforts, but also maybe kind of create more opportunities for public events and other kind of community sporting events.
Thanks. John Stackpole.
Yes, we're focusing now on probably projects to finish up what we have done in acquisitions. We have probably, as I said, 16 or 20 partially funded projects. They're not stopped, but it takes time to get permits and stuff. So some of these projects are a few years out. We're focusing a great deal on agriculture where we weren't before because of the transition we've gone from acquiring land to finishing off the projects. And for example, in the agricultural end of it with the community gardens, we had 220 people apply for a community garden where we have 46 plots. So I think it's important that we do more with the community gardens, and that's would be one of my priorities right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Yes, I think all 3 are important, and I definitely feel as the land bank now is more of a mature organization and has acquired more property. As John says, some of the focus starts to shift to actual use, more use of the property, and certainly maintaining and acquiring as much public access to beach and waterfront properties is an ongoing priority. Some of these recreational properties, again, can be developed, and as John said, there's quite a bit of stuff that's in the works. I feel like some of my background in evaluating budgets can just make sure that those funds are getting allocated in a prudent manner. And as the land bank now starts to develop some of them historical properties that were farms, or potentially creating new farms out of existing property that they own, I think that my lifelong involvement in agriculture will serve the commission well to help flesh out and develop guidelines for the use of the property that ensures that it's supporting agriculture, but not subsidizing it. I feel strongly that, you know, this is an area that that needs some attention and but also needs good guidance to make sure that it becomes a long-term win for the land bank and for the community. And again, I feel like I'm in a unique position to be able to do that going forward.
Thank you. Next question. Do you see tension developing between the land bank's goal of preserving open space and the growing need for community housing? And how would you address that? And I think we'll start in the middle with Mr. Stackpole.
Would you repeat that again?
Do you see tension developing between your goal of preserving open space and the growing need for community housing? And how would you address that?
Well, the first place, our goal is not housing. We do housing for staff and we do housing for Myakama Golf Course, which of course we own and run. But our priorities are not housing for the community because it doesn't fit into our act. We're prohibited from buying property for housing for the island. We can, however, work with the housing authority and other groups. If there's a piece of land, for example, we could buy part of the land and make part of it available for housing, but that would be about the only way we could do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, that's a good segue because I think I misspoke on the last answer. Instead of conservation, I ended up talking about housing. I think obviously conservation is so hugely important, and Nantucket wouldn't be the place it was if not for previous efforts and continued efforts. I think kind of back to topping, I think I addressed why I think I'd be able to bridge that conversation more. I kind of second what John said, like we have to stay within the scope and charter of the land bank, but I think because of the land bank's significance in the community, they may be able to kind of to work with and leverage their role in future projects in alignment with various housing entities.
Thanks. John Bartlett.
So it is a bit of a conundrum in that available space and housing kind of compete with one another. But again, the land bank's charter isn't designed to look at housing, you know, and other than you know, working collaboratively with other local groups to identify partnerships within the land bank's charter, housing doesn't really fall within their scope. I think that needs to be addressed outside of the focus, you know, of the land bank.
Thank you. One final question. How would you work to strengthen the working relationship between or among the land bank, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and the Nantucket Land and Water Council? And we'll start with Kelly this time.
I'm thinking about my work in kind of the food security sector, like in partnership with NRP, we created these work groups that have a lot of the directors and administrative staff of different food programming operations and nonprofits, and we now host, I think, triannual meetings with this group. I think it'd be something along the same lines of a recurring meeting, and where kind of we can find common messaging, we can share where the different entities could share new insights, and I think just out of more discussion and creating that room for discussion, in turn, alignment and collaboration just follows.
Thank you. John Bartlett.
Yeah, I think you know, there's a lot of room to continue the good work that all three organizations have done in preserving you know, open space and conservation, and you know, again, working collaboratively with those organizations on the land bank, and to share experience. So all three organizations aren't trying to recreate the wheel or spend resources that have already been spent by another organization to do similar types of projects. And I feel that, you know, the land bank and I think there is already a good working relationship with the various non-for-profits and conservation on Nantucket. But you know, I would work to continue that and continue an open dialogue going forward.
Thank you. Maureen, I don't see any questions from the audience. Do you?
No, neither do I. No more for this group.
Okay, so we'll turn to closing statements then, and we'll begin with John Stackpole.
You didn't mention me when you were asking that last question, but
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Please.
I will add on to that for that. We have a very strong relationship with those organizations. Our staffs work together. For example, we just did the forestry and the clearing out the pines. We've done some on Hunk Pond Road, and we worked with them on Nantucket Road. And so we have a very strong organization, and they have worked very well with us, and we've worked very well with them through the staff and the directors of the organization. In closing, I'd like to say that I'm committed to continue the projects we're on. As I said, we're transitioning more from acquiring new properties to making sure we build out on the ones we have. And I think that's very important. We've got a lot of good projects involved, particularly like the Lily Pond, which is going to take all the shedding water from North Liberty Street and Cliff Road area and that whole area of the island, and put it through the Lily Pond and clean it, and it goes back into the harbor. So that's a 5-year project, a $5 million project that we want to continue on and make sure it happens. Coastal resiliency is very important. It's not going to be anything that we see happen, but it's going to affect our grandchildren. And we're very on top of it, and we're going to stay on top of that. So I'd like to thank you for hosting this today, and I'd like to tell all the mothers out there, Happy Mother's Day for tomorrow. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Kelly Steffen.
Yeah. Well, I have much more to learn about how to be an effective civic leader and the intricacies of municipal government. I hope my dedication to understanding the needs of islanders, building a better community, and fostering collaboration is evident from what I've said previously. Call me crazy, but I left town meeting Thursday night elated. I love working for the greater good. I love working on behalf of my neighbors. I'm eager to learn and serve and find solutions for Nantucket's most important issues. And I would be honored to do that at the Land Bank if I am fortunate enough to be elected.
Thank you. And we'll close with Mr. Bartlett.
Yes, thank you again to the Civic League for putting on this forum, and to the to the incumbent, Mr. Stackpole, and to Kelly for throwing their hat along with myself into the ring. I feel it's important to have choices for the voters, and to give them options. And I am asking for your vote on May 21st, and I hope to serve you for the next 5 years on the Land Bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all the candidates. Next up is the Community Preservation Committee. We have 4 candidates for 2 seats. They are Jesse Dutra, Kit Murphy, Neville Rishin, and Tim Soverino. And so if Jesse Dutra is on, we'd like to start with you with your opening statement.
Jesse Dutra and Tim Soverino did not eventually make it onto the meet.
Oh, wow. That's funny because I spoke to Tim this morning about getting him the link. So I wonder if he's having problems.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Well, we'll start with you then.
Yeah, we have Tim, but we don't have Jesse, I guess. So.
Okay, Tim, well, we'll start with you. Opening statement.
Well, thank you. Hello to the volunteers putting this forum on today. my fellow candidates, and to you, the voters of Nantucket. My name is Tim Savarino, as been stated, not my wife that shows up on the screen, but I am very interested in continuing on the Community Preservation Committee. I've served in government for over 20 years in different roles, as a selectman for many years, on the Finance Committee for many years. But nothing has been as rewarding as working actually on the Community Preservation Committee. There are so many worthy organizations on Nantucket that are struggling to maintain their properties or their buildings or their programs. And the Community Preservation Committee is one way that the community has set aside money to help these worthy organizations continue their endeavors. And I would very much like to continue. And it's been a real privilege to work on this and very rewarding. And I hope the voters will keep me in mind. Thank you very much.
Is Kit Murphy on?
I am. You want me to start?
Your opening statement, please. Yes.
Okay, well, I didn't write down an opening statement because that's kind of not how I roll, but thank you to the on-camera talent, and more importantly, thank you to the behind-the-scenes talent at NCTV, and to every candidate. I think it's great that we have so many contested races. I think it shows that interest in civic life on Nantucket is alive and well. I'm not as well known as the two incumbents, but I have been here a long time. I came in 1984 with my then boyfriend, who became my husband. And by 1996, I was spending 8+ months a year. So months a year here. So I became a resident, and I've got 28 consecutive ATMs under my belt, along with 28 consecutive Nantucket elections. This is the first time I've run for town election. I've been appointed to various committees along the way, and I served 2 or 3 terms on the FinCom. When I moved to Nantucket, I worked a bit for the MSPCA, Pacific National Bank, and Educational Management Network. Before coming to Nantucket, I had a 25-year career in banking in Albany, New York, and then also in New York City. I managed a very large loan portfolio, over $250 million. And in my mind, evaluating loan proposals is very much along the lines of evaluating grant proposals, except with a grant proposal, you're not looking to be paid back. I have my notes that I need to look down on. I love the fact that there's such a collaborative nature to so many of the requests that come to the CPC. As Tim mentioned, there are so many worthwhile entities on Nantucket that struggle, and the CPC sees a lot of smaller asks for grants, and these smaller amounts of money are really, really important to these not-for-profits. And I think that's the end of my statement.
Thank you. Neville Richin. Do you have an opening?
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Neville Richin. How are you doing? I want to thank the Nantucket Civic League and also the NCTV for allowing us this the opportunity to introduce ourselves to the community. I've been involved with the CPC since its inception back in 2000, 2001. At that time, I came on representing Park and Rec. And after I retired, at that time I was still working, so I retired from the town. I left the Park and Rec, and I took on a challenge with the CPC to devote time towards setting up permanent CPC office on Nantucket. And I did this for a while, all through 2018, close into the 2020-21. And I was asked to if I wanted to run for an at-large seat. At that time, I ran for one other seat, and I said, okay, I'll try it. And I kind of wanted to get my foot back in on the workings of the CPC in that way, after working administratively for a while, because it was very exciting setting up the office. Anyways, I went in and ran for the at-large seat in the CPC, and I got it, and along with my friend Tim Savarino. Just to talk about, the CPC has accomplished a lot of amazing things on Nantucket, which comes under its areas of funding for open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. And the CPC on Nantucket, during my involvement, I believe has spent in the area of over $50 million in these areas, contributing to the betterment of the lives of the people of Nantucket. So I am very proud of and part of it, and wish to continue. During my years on the CPC, and the time I spent in the office of the CPC, I've had the opportunity to work closely with CPC Coalition in Boston and other CPC administrators around the state in the exchange of ideas, nuances that may come up from community to community, as well as conversational situations, controversial situations, of which there are many, which may or may not alter qualifications for funding. And of course, this is based on the uniqueness of the individual community, of which Nantucket is one. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got two questions for you. The first question is, given that this committee recommends the allocation of millions of dollars annually, what properties or projects would you prioritize? And we'll start with Tim again.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So under the statute, the Community Preservation Committee has 3 obligations that we must meet annually. And that comes in the form of 30% of our money broken down into 3 categories must be spent on open space, affordable housing, and preservation. So of our annual account, if you will, we need to keep that in mind with regard to the grant approvals that we make. Then, Mr. Moderator, it's a whole different ballgame. It depends on the strength of the applications that are put forward. I forgot also one part of that is we have existing debt payments, bond payments, and administration costs that we must fund also. But back to the strength of the applications, every year it's different. Whether there's an application, for example, from the American Legion that a wall's about to cave in and they don't have the money to fix it, or a church needs help, or there's some open space opportunities available, or so it's hard to say what I would give priority to, because the priorities that are put in front of us every year change so dramatically. But they're all worthy, and they're all things that as a community we need, and without them we'd be in not as good a place. Thank you.
Thank you. Kit Murphy.
The question was, what would I prioritize?
Yes.
Well, I love the fact that so many of the grants seem to be for historic preservation of our local churches, because they are some of the oldest buildings here. I think what my priority would be is in terms of community housing. I'm a huge fan of the Lease to Locals program, and I would love to, if I'm elected, even if I'm not elected, I would love to see some sort of collaborative grant requests come in to benefit lease least for locals. They seem to kind of be bouncing around and not really being able to fit their program into any of our other affordable housing programs. So that, yeah, lease to locals would definitely be probably, one of my top priorities.
Thank you. Neville, Richard.
Yes, that's a very good question because I have to say, as friend Tim said, the Community Preservation Committee is a very unusual place. It's a very unusual committee. So to really say which will be your favorite, they're all favorites. I'm sorry to say, they're all favorites. There are things that has that we have the grant requests that we have gotten. Some we had to work with. I know for instance, in the very beginning, I was on Park and Rec, and the thing that I liked was that we were involved with at that time was trying to see if we can get more parks on the outskirts, like Children's Beach was one, or the park, the playground, Children's Beach Playground, or the playground in Tom Nevers. And putting playgrounds in different parts of the island, even the one down in Sconset. And these were all funded through Park and Rec, through the CPC. Park and Rec came to the CPC plan. So that's a favorite. Open space is another favorite. The Linda Loring Foundation, when Linda Loring left that large area of land just for exploration and people to go and enjoy the nature of the island. That was a favorite. Housing is a big favorite. I like what right now a lot of the housing gets a big lift from us from whence they start. In the beginning, I believe there were 3 entities for housing that we were funding. Now they all come under one, affordable housing. So which works out very well. So and as we're working, as I'm seeing all of this, you're seeing everything kind of molds together to make our job a lot easier in terms of funding. I would look, I would be challenged to find something new. I know in talking sometimes, say like, we should have a lot of projects that should be coming back. Like I know one of our first projects was the Athenaeum, the painting of the outside of the Athenaeum where they found rotting wood and all of that, and just to restore to the historic building. I would like to, so we were looking at things like that coming back, but you don't know what's gonna happen. Or I believe it was mentioned about the churches. What is going to be coming? I mean, I am looking at things that already exist, that we already funded, to come back with something new, and it's fascinating. Something that was missed in the overall picture. I think someone mentioned the American Legion Hall. Funding for the American Legion Hall came from the CPC for the bricks, for the outside bricks, and I think it was started. Then we found out the bricks it wasn't being done properly. We had to stop and start all over again because it was a restoration. It was a restoration, not a repair. So it's very hard to pick one. They're all very, very good, and that's why I like being involved with the CPC because of those challenges. And also our committee. The committee is so diverse and varied, so it makes it even more interesting. Because we come from different places to come with different ideas, to come up to one solution in terms of like what we eventually will be funding. We each assigned different projects, so we are learning as we're going. The projects you're assigned to isn't necessarily from whence you came. Like for instance, if you represent the HDC, you may get something on open space. So you're learning as you're going. So they're all favorites.
Thank you. Thank you. Second question, and I'm sort of making this up on the fly, but relationships between the CPC and the other organizations like the Housing Trust and the Community Foundation for Nantucket. What can you do to strengthen the relationship that you might have with those other philanthropic organizations. And we'll start with, I guess we'll start with Neville.
I think we've already started. We're working a lot closer with them than we had in the past. From my take, we've actually gone to them for advice, and they've actually helped us with a lot of the people that the projects that we do fund. Some of them we will send to them so they can get some advice from these different organizations. I like the idea of them coming into us and helping us with what we do. So that is something I would encourage more and more. It's not a negative thing at all. It's a very, very positive thing that's going on with us with them now.
Thank you. Kit Murphy.
Well, I think Nantucket generally has gotten much better with organizations acting in a collaborative manner. With regard to the ones that you mentioned, they also seem to be in the grant funding business. So there's clearly a lot that we can learn from them, and maybe some things that they can learn from us. I would like to think if they had a grant proposal that they couldn't entertain or wasn't in their purview, they would look for it to be in the CPC's purview and, bring it on over.
Thanks. Tim Severino.
Well, the great thing about being an organization that has money is everyone wants to be your friend and partner with you. And there's no better example of that than we were the first large grant to the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust. We approved a $5 million bond for them long before town meeting approved funding anything of any size. So I think we have a pretty good history with the two organizations that you've mentioned. And just for example, that $5 million bond that we turned over to the Housing Trust, that actually costs us on an annual basis about $500,000 a year out of the $2 million that we have to appropriate. So that's a long-term commitment to the trust and to trying to make some dent in the affordable housing problem for the island. And that's just one example of the many things that CPC does. But I think, as something Kit said, and it's so true, some of the smaller organizations that don't have the horsepower of some of the big name like the trust, but small organizations that are very worthy and do great work. For example, the community garden. We give grants. They needed a refrigerator or a cooler to help keep the produce from spoiling. Those are kind of the other end of the spectrum of projects that we fund that most people wouldn't have thought of. But CPC is a great organization, and I hope to continue to work on these. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of which, it's now time for the closing arguments, seeing no questions from the audience. And so first up with their closing argument, let's go with Neville Richard.
Okay. I don't have too much on that. Now, standing on my experience, I know I'm able to stand up for the correct administration of the CPC funds on Nantucket, and I ask you for your vote that I can continue to serve my community. The thing after serving, or is serving, but after CPC has been on Nantucket for quite a while, and with all the good that happens, sometimes we get little, we do get little snafus and little snapheads where people come to get funding for things that we really cannot fund. And I am not saying that we do fund these things, and we don't. We're very careful about how we spend the people's money, but I do know that we have to really be on our toes. We have to be on our toes when these grants start pouring in, to go over them, and when the applicants come in, to make sure we go through it with a fine-tooth comb with them, so we are able to make proper decisions. And I think that is a very important thing in that, because as was said previously, we have a lot of, we funded a lot of money to a lot of good causes. And there are also, there's the little things like, as was mentioned, the farm, or just the cooler for the farm, or it's coming up like a well so water can get to the farm, things like that. And at some point, I know that I know one thing that's very important with CPC, for instance, we have not done that yet, but CPC can also purchase land and build houses. They can also purchase land and build parks. Those are two areas that we haven't even broached yet. It'll be exciting to get to a point with things like that, as exciting as that can happen. Thank you, and please vote for me.
Thank you. Kit Murphy.
You call this a closing argument. I think I'm going to call it a closing statement, because I certainly have no argument.
That's the lawyer in me, I'm sorry.
I certainly have no argument with Tim and Neville's service and what they've helped the CPC accomplish. And I don't know, and they can answer this, if the CPC has ever had a contested race for open spots. If they haven't, I think it's, well, even if they had, I think it's great that there's 4 people running for 2 spots. It certainly shows an interest in what goes on at the CPC and wanting to be part of it. I can't dig down as granularly as these 2 gentlemen have in terms of, the various grants and what have you, but I do have a really good understanding of what the CPC does, how they're funded. I will admit I've never attended a CPC meeting, but before I pulled my papers, I talked to a number of current and former CPC members. I've also been involved in a lot of organizations that have made use of CPC grants, like the Sconset Trust got a CPC grant for renovating the interior of Sankaty Head Lighthouse. I was on the board and the treasurer of Landmark House. I'm on the advisory board of the Nantucket Shipwreck and Life-Saving Museum. And I know they've been to the CPC before, and I know they currently have a grant request into the CPC. Basically, I would be a really good committee member. I've been on boards before. I know what it is to work collaboratively, and I know what to do when a vote goes against you. You basically just suck it up and go on with the committee's work. And so I'm hoping I get elected.
Thank you. Tim Soverino.
Well, we won't hold being a lawyer against you. But in all seriousness, thank you to the Civic League for giving us the opportunity to talk to the community. It's so important. And as was said earlier in the planning board discussion, it's so hard to reach people and get people involved. And this is a wonderful opportunity to at least try to improve that. So thank you very much for that. To the voters of Nantucket, I would be honored if I could continue on with the CPC. But I think any of the 4 candidates running would do a fine job. And I'm only biased because I'm running. I would say that growing up here on Nantucket, I went to Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts and church dinners and a lot of these buildings, and I thought they were old and ransacked then. And it's been a pleasure to try to bring some CPC money to help them rejuvenate their properties, rejuvenate their buildings. For a long time before the CPC, there was a lot of things that needed attention that didn't get done. And that has been said, the CPC has helped small and big organizations try to preserve the treasures that we have in our community. So if elected, I'll continue to work hard to try to do that and prioritize them in a manner in which I think is most beneficial. And again, many thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Great panel. Thank you all very much. Our final panel today is the Historic District Commission, where we have two candidates for one seat. They're Angus MacLeod and Joseph Paul. And we'd like to turn to you for your opening statement. Let's start with Mr. Paul. You're on mute. Oops, we lose him? Well, let's go to Angus MacLeod, and we'll see if we can get Mr. Paul back.
Good afternoon, and thank you to NTV and to the Nantucket Civic League for bringing this to the Nantucket voters. And gosh, I have lived on the island for just over 40 years. This has been my home. This is where I've learned my skills, and I've worked as an architectural designer and actually hands-on preservation work in the trades, painting and carpentry. I had the pleasure and luxury of working with some very talented people on the island over the years, working in historic buildings around the island. And the more I've learned about the buildings and the streetscapes and the history of the island, I learned that I couldn't take it for granted. And so as much as I would support the Historical Association or NPT or any of the preservation groups on the island, in the past 10 years, I've been invited to join a number of groups. I think it probably totals 5 now, that I've worked with the Sconset Advisory Board to the HDC, the Historic Structures Advisory Board to the HDC. I've been a director for the Nantucket Preservation Trust. I've worked with and still do with the South Church Preservation Fund. Hearing the CPC candidates, it reminds me of how great it's been to have their support in the work that we've done. Yeah, so I feel that Nantucket has certainly changed since I got here in the early 80s. And the pressures have just grown exponentially as far as development and just the pressures from like the latest really is the short-term rentals, and and unfortunately something that I refer to as marketecture, which is really catering to what is trending. And I'm afraid that it's at the expense of the integrity of Nantucket's history and what makes it unique. It's a very special place to me. And it's a place that I hope to call home for the rest of my life. And so in all the work that I've done in the past, I feel that this is a transition and a natural progression for me to move on to the HDC that really has control of what our environment, our architecture, and our legacy is going to be for the future.
Okay, thank you. I see Mr. Paul. Welcome back. We had Angus do his opening statement. Now you can do yours.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I missed it, Angus. And yeah, I've been listening all day and making sure that I didn't accidentally have my audio on. And apparently we had a little bit of a malfunction. So I'm glad I was able to get back. Well, thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for hosting this to the Civic League. My name's Joe Paul, and I've been a year-round resident for 28 years and a business owner and a dad. I have a kid in the school system here, and grew up in Western Mass, and my only sibling is also here on the island. I'm a licensed architect in Massachusetts and nine other states, although all of my work is here on the island. Being on the island 28 years, I've been involved in the building and design community, and I've sat on the other side of the HDC table, and it's been an interesting process. The HDC's changed a lot over the years. My first time at the HDC was to present my own house, and I was petrified. John McLaughlin I'd heard all kinds of bad things and to be careful and so forth, and he turned out to be a gentleman. And over the years, he encouraged me to join. And I actually went forward last year, and I was appointed by the select board as an associate member of the HDC. And I thought I knew what I was in for, but I'll tell you that being on the board on the other side of the table for the last 9 months has been a real education, and seeing the involvement of the historical commission and also of our preservation planner, and really realizing firsthand the importance of the role of the HDC board member. It's been very eye-opening. It's been very rewarding. And my fellow board members encouraged me to reach out and, run for this full position. We don't always have consensus on the board, but I think I have their support, and I'm proud to be part of a group that feels like it's running really well, and that we're respectful to our applicants and so forth. And I think there's a collective understanding of how important our role is. So I'm here to be elevated, I guess, from an associate position to a full-time position, so I can sit on all of the applications, not just some of them. And I think I've known Angus for quite a while, and I have a lot of respect for what he does. So I think the community has two great candidates for this HDC position.
Thank you very much. Glad you made it back. 2 questions for you. We'll go in the same order, Angus and then Joe. The first question is, should solar panels be permitted island-wide? Or if not, how would you propose to regulate them? And we'll start with Angus.
Thank you for that. Solar and renewables are invaluable. That is the direction we have to go. I've been in conversations with some of the installers of solar on the island and Lauren Sinatra about a community solar, so that people in the community who may not be in the most appropriate place, let's say a 200-year-old house on Main Street, could still participate in solar, or even people who rent, who don't own a property but still want to take advantage of subsidies that are available, or just wanting to be, greener in their use of power. I've reviewed a number of applications in my advisory role, and when they're not seen, they make perfect sense. I just wish that there were options for when they aren't appropriate or detract from the historic character of a streetscape or a particular significant property.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, your question was whether or not they should be allowed island-wide, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll tell you that reviewing solar applications is one of the most challenging things to review, because everybody, I think, supports renewable power, and the design solution being presented to achieve the power needs are often not congruent with what we would like to have aesthetically in an ideal world, no matter where it is on the island. I haven't seen any beautiful ones. They're certainly getting more conspicuous, but then there are some guidelines that have been employed, like having it on a black roof and not on the front of a building. And I think that should be true island-wide. The interesting thing with, like, in town, in the old historic district, there's very little opportunity for a lack of visibility given the density. So even if it's on the rear of a building, I have a real hard time thinking that they'd be permissible, and it has to be on a case-by-case basis. On the other hand, you see storm windows all over the island on these historic homes, and that's more of a modern day thing, and energy related too. But I think a proliferation of solar panels in the old historic district would do a disservice to the historic fabric that we have. So they really need to be carefully employed. And I think what's happening is that a lot of the installers and the designers are becoming educated and understanding how to get an approval. And some of the presenters are navigating that with more ease than others. But it really is an island-wide issue that the HDC is very concerned about. But personally, I would be reluctant to approve them in the OHD.
Thank you. My second question is, what will you do to improve HDC's processes for approving applications, and are the HDC staffing levels adequate? And we'll start with you.
With me, Joe?
Joe, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. That's a loaded question. It's a fair question. It's a very fair question. I think that the HDC staff internally is overwhelmed. There's certainly evidence of that. I don't know if anybody would dispute that. I mean, interestingly, I think one of the reasons why they're overwhelmed is actually the board, myself included, was really trying to make an effort to get people an approval that's appropriate. And at least in my 28 years of being on the other side of the table, projects never got approved in one night or 2 nights. It was 5 nights. It was a 3-month process. And there are a lot of pre-reviews of projects that go out and are reviewed for consent approval weekly. And that burdens the staff, frankly, because when it's a staff approval, it's no longer being approved at the table. All that paperwork is being handled internally. I think last week we had 50 consent items. Then the other thing is when we get to the board, and one of the things that I've done unintentionally, but it's sort of happened because I'm an architect and I'm on the HDC, these things called Exhibit A's, where all of our instruction previously to an applicant was verbal, and they relied on the minutes to employ the revisions. Well, I started sketching these things with the iPad, which is super helpful with this format and with Zoom, and sketching over applications and literally drawing something that represented what the decision was, which has made for applications to be approved in 1 or 2 meetings. That Exhibit A also ends up becoming more of a staff thing. So I think in an effort to try to diminish the workload, I think we were just told by an independent group that we're the busiest HDC review board in the entire country. And there's landscape and paving and buildings and everything. We're trying to get those through more quickly, and it's definitely overburdened the staff and the process. So I think that there's a need to have that staff expanded in order to make the process more, I don't know, just more simplified, frankly, and to be quicker to turn around to get to permitting and things like that.
Thank you. Angus, over to you.
Thank you. Joe brings up very valid points and concerns. That having been on the presenting side of the HDC since the mid to late 80s, and then through the 90s and so on, I've watched an evolution. And when it began, there was a HDC administrator, its own office, and staff. And my earliest days of going into the HDC office was becoming familiar with building with Nantucket in mind. And there was a very helpful staff that was busy looking at projects that people were bringing in that they wanted to present, but the staff was able to say, no, you really can't build 4 stories or, have one whole glass wall. In building with Nantucket in mind, this is the sort of massing and fenestration guidelines that there are. So there was a vetting that happened before projects ever made it to the HDC. But what I liked about that was so people were able to make things more appropriate before presenting it to the HDC. At that time, the HDC would process or review every application. And one of my concerns with staff doing the approvals, because what they do is now, with the consent items, it just goes in one lump thing. So unless a particular or any or all of the HDC members, unless they take the time and sort of go on their own and look at these applications, they're not really getting reviewed by the board that's supposed to review them. And that's a concern to me. So I think that it's part of a larger systemic issue, which is a lack of familiarity or conforming to the building with Nantucket in mind, which is, not to the letter, but gives very good principles to go by. And that's led to applications that I used to see applications that would go through in 1 time or 2 times. And there were applications that would go for months and years. So that's a new phenomenon. And I think that that's part of why the HDC is overburdened, because of the lack of appropriateness of the applications.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Maureen with some audience questions. Maureen?
Yes. Let's see, get back to the chat. Yes. So this is from Joe Topham. Says some of the public have stated they feel like they don't have a voice at town boards or they haven't been heard. And this was mentioned earlier during this meeting. How would you correct this issue?
And we'll start with Angus.
Well, as far as the HDC goes, it's a very public process. And now after COVID, it's expanded to Zoom, which really makes it accessible to anyone, anytime. So I'm not sure exactly how that applies to the HDC. Sorry.
I second what Angus says. No, and truthfully, I think what Angus said is exactly spot on, that the best thing that came out of COVID is certainly Zoom meetings. And in terms of previously, people would fly into an HDC meeting and they'd try to move their application because they had to catch a boat. And it was definitely a burden for neighbors to be at a meeting and to have a voice. And I feel like that has greatly increased with the current format, and people do show up in person. But there are a lot of neighbors. There is, I think, might be a little thing that's confusing is the abutter notifications. There's different criteria, different square footage for different parts of the island, and people might miss an abutter notification, or the project might be too small. It didn't warrant an abutter notification, and they feel like it should have. There are definitely people that have spoken up at meetings where they felt like they should have been made aware. I think the only tweak might be that every application gets notified regardless of scale and regardless of where it is on the island. We don't want to have to second guess something. I mean, actually having a neighbor show up and getting their comments beforehand. Every week we're distributed letters of concern from neighbors days in advance of the meeting, sometimes the day of the meeting. I do feel like that there's a pathway. At least some people are following it. I guess it's sort of ingrained now, so I'm not sure what it's like for just a member of the community to access the HDC, like who's their point person that they would go to. I mean, Holly as the preservation planner is, I mean, she wears so many hats that I would imagine that that's the first person they reach out to. That's the person we get these letters from. So I do feel like it's a pretty open process.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a second part of the question, and each of you have addressed this somewhat. But if you want to, he asked, how can you make the HDC more streamlined and efficient? And maybe we could say what would be your priority, because I know you've each addressed it. So if we add priority to that question and start with Joe.
Sure. Well, it was interesting to hear Angus describe the old HDC office that had like Pat Butler and James was in there, and yeah, having the pre-review. We're doing a few pre-reviews right now for large commercial projects. Our Island Home and a commercial project and a town housing project, we're having pre-HDC meetings. These are larger structures. They're off-island architects. They might not be able to navigate the nuances of building with Nantucket in mind. So I'm hoping that they're finding that that process will mean that they're not going to the board with something that's completely inappropriate. So I think some accessibility to the pre-review is an interesting thought, not just on a large scale commercial project, but even on a smaller project, like some sort of a advisory board that reviews these things as a group, not as an individual, and is able to offer feedback before a formal application. That way the applications reviewed have been vetted.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Angus. Yeah, you answer. Sorry.
Well, yes, I'll second everything that Joe is saying. I mean, with we've had recent, events in the HDC of it getting folded into the plus department. So there isn't a dedicated staff, there isn't a dedicated administrator. And so a lot of that burden fell onto the advisory boards for a pre-review. And then the advisory boards gotten rid of. So I think one of the biggest things is to bring back the long tradition of having advisory boards. They have the the expertise and the history and the knowledge about these nuanced areas of town and Sconset and Nantucket. And we should probably have more that are from Wilwinnet and, other parts of the island. After 40 years here, I feel that, there's still places that I'm discovering, and the places that I know well. And I think that the people who dedicate their time on the advisory boards, bring that knowledge with them. And I think that would be really helpful to have their insight before bringing a project before the HDC board. I think it would save everyone time. And as far as I just wanted to go back to the last question for a second. When Joe brought up about people coming from off island, is a number of owners or designers or such are coming from other places. The Zoom really has saved time, but it's also lowered the carbon footprint of an actual meeting. And so I think those are all good tools.
Thank you.
We have a kind of a follow-up to the question that you were just answering. Someone is asking, Beverly Damon is asking how to make the HEC application, could the HDC application process be online rather than the large paper application? Would this make the process be more simplified?
We'll start with Angus.
That's a really good question. And anyone who's submitted an application or reviewed an application, they are required to be electronically documented. So there's already sort of an online review. And whenever I go into Nantucket office products and I see the reams of paper that are used for the meetings every week, because you have to have 4 copies of everything. And as the projects grow in scale, the number of pages and the size of the pages, there's so much waste in a system where we really are already looking at things electronically. So I'd love to see that reduced. And in the end, when the building department needs a hard copy and the applicant needs a hard copy, I understand printing out a final version, but to have all these, series of papers, especially for the legacy projects that go on and on, what a savings in time and material to stream that by being more electronic. Even though I draw by hand still.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, every deadline when I print out paper, I shake my head, because then, as Angus said, you then follow up with a PDF and electronically. And we actually we send abutters notifications. This kind of goes back, I guess, to the noticing neighbors. You send an abutter notification, but you don't send any information with it. There's no drawing with it. There's nothing. It's just your neighbor's got an application up. So if there was a way that could actually be communicated to a neighbor electronically, then they're getting informed before the meeting and they can evaluate what they think of it before they actually show up at the meeting, which is the first time they're seeing it. I believe if they call the board, they can get a copy of it, but it's not a seamless part of the process. It's not an integral part of the process. I don't have any insider information, but I'm hoping that the paper thing just goes away completely. It really should. Every meeting we review things on a PDF. Everybody at the table is reviewing on an iPad, and actually applicants now understand that that's the primary way to present. And we're getting video files and we're watching people walk down the street. This is what this project's going to look like. This is what it looks like when you drive down the street. None of that can be communicated with paper. And that's how people want to communicate. And that's how they're used to communicating. So yeah, I think we're of the generation where we're going to see that transition, and I hope it's like in the next, it'd be nice if it was in the next year. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've got a comment back from Joe Topham, where your responses were where you thought there was a lot of public input, and Joe agrees, says now the HGC, Planning Board, Concom, and ZBA have the same process of access. So I agree, there is no issue of public input. And he also added, let's see, let me go back to a separate question from Kit Murphy. Do you think there are enough recusals happening with regard to HDC applications?
And this will be our last question, and we'll start with Joe.
Sure. That's a good question. I've personally recused when I didn't feel like I needed to. Either it was a former client that had hired another architect and was there presenting, and I just decided I should not sit on it. I didn't have any financial interest in it, which I understand is kind of the threshold for recusal. I would say that I've seen my fellow board members recuse themselves, and I've recused myself with no financial interest, just wanting to avoid any conflict. And we have enough alternates, of which I'm one. There's three of us. We sit on at least 30% of the applications on any given night because of recusals or because that somebody isn't present. So I feel like there is definitely a culture of sensitivity to that among the board members. I don't see it as a problem. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Angus?
I think that's right. I think that the board is sensitive to conflicts of interest. For me, I'm not as involved in sort of the mainstream development things. There's like a program that seems to be proliferating rapidly, which is, the main house and the guest house and the pool house and the cabana and, all this stuff. And then certain details that I feel that some on the commission, because they have their own clients with the demands for the same things, that even if they recuse, there's sort of a, well, they're going to let it pass. And so, or they'll vote in favor of it and that'll help me and my thing. So I don't know, I feel like there's a certain amount of awareness of passing things because that's going to sort of come back around. But I think for the most part, the HDC members are really conscious about conflicts of interest and when they should recuse.
Thank you. You each now have up to 1 minute for a closing statement, and we'll start with Angus.
Well, it's a privilege to be in this race with Joe Paul, who I have great respect for. I have been on both sides of the HDC process for decades, and so I have a great awareness of and sensitivity to the concerns of both sides. So I feel like I could be fair. I feel that the HTC, like others in leadership roles, really need to be firm, fair, and consistent. I think it makes it easier for the applicants and certainly for the review, for people to know where they stand. And the Building with Nantucket in Mind, was the earlier edition that was revised from the late 70s and then redone in the mid 90s, has been on the table for another update. It's been 30 years. And so it's time for that. And I'd like to see the HTC be less burdened with applications and be able to move on things like updating the Building with Nantucket in Mind, participating in the new union with the Nantucket Historical Commission, which is the CLG, which has provided funding for the updated surveys of properties on Nantucket, which is an exciting project we've been doing with the Historical Commission. But I would be honored to serve the community in this new role if I were to be elected. So I thank you for your vote and your participation, and thanks again for the NCTV and the Civic Association.
Thank you. Joe Paul.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not running to run against Angus, and Angus isn't running to run against me. I think we both care about the built environment here, and it's certainly one of the reasons why I chose to come here after architecture school was to work in an environment that had a rich built environment that people appreciated and cared about. And at the time, I never thought that I would actually be sitting on the HDC, but it's been wonderful the last 9 months. And seeing the opportunity for improvement there that has come up really in this forum, actually, through some of the questions, I feel like it's an exciting time to be a part of the HDC. I do feel like there's momentum building among the board to figure out how we can improve this and make it easier for an applicant, and how can we make it better for the community to preserve our historic buildings, given the limited jurisdiction that the HDC actually has. That's a challenge. And there's definitely the word that came up with the previous candidates was collaboration. And I know it's a little bit of an overused word, but there's very little, in my opinion, collaboration between, say, planning board, zoning board, and HDC. And all projects pretty much are subject to dealing with all those boards. And I think there's opportunity here, not just to sit on the board, but also to help work towards a collaborative effort with the other boards that are on Nantucket, with the common interest being to preserve our historic fabric. So I've enjoyed being an alternate, but I would like to have a stronger role, a more, I guess, consistent role where it's not 30% of the applications, but it's only the ones that I don't have to recuse myself from. And I'd like to be part of, I think, the HDC's evolution, in some ways going back to the way it was before, where it did have its own office and was able to do things with some autonomy and organization. I'd be very proud to serve the community in that regard. So I hope that I'll get your vote on the 21st. To appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll let that be the final word on today's forum. It's been a long day. It's been a long week and a long day, full of information. We'd like to thank the crew at NCTV 8 for putting this production together, and especially John Carl McGrady, who was awesome today in support from a remote location in the Berkshires. We'd like to thank the candidates for their time taking the time to express their views. And we'd like to thank you, the audience, for your participation and questions today. With that, we'll sign off by reminding everyone to vote on May 21st. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.